Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are looking at an interview that was done with Anton Yudintsev, who is of course the CEO of Gaijin, and also Vyacheslav Bulanikov, who is the War Thunder producer or creative producer, head developer, whatever you want to call him. Basically, he's the guy who does all of the Q&As on the English side of things, and also is the guy who appears on the dev streams. And also, it seems like we might be having some dev streams tomorrow, so if you are interested in watching along, we will be streaming them in the morning if they are available. This Q&A was done by 4gamer.net in collaboration with DMM Games. DMM Games is obviously the platform which runs War Thunder when it comes to the Japanese side of things, and they also released an interesting article today when it comes to War Thunder itself, talking about the Yamato and also future battleships coming in the future. This also Q&A, which we're going to go over today, does cover a few other things which should be quite nice to look at, some interesting information, so let's go through it one by one. So the vast majority of these questions are aimed at BVVD, and he is the one that answers them, so take that as the direct person who is answering. If it is any different, I'll make sure to mention that it was Anton answering, or Mr. Yudintsev. So let's have a look at the first question, and understand this is a translated interview, which means that there may be a few technical differences. I'll try and clear up the language issues, if there are any, as we go along. So the first question was, War Thunder is celebrating its 5th anniversary in Japan. Please tell us your impressions. With the answer being, it's important for us that people all over the world enjoy War Thunder and maintain a good presence in all major markets. Through our partnership with DMM Games, we were able to provide local support, payment methods, events, and collaboration activities for Japanese players. We hope that Japanese players will enjoy all of this and continue to play War Thunder. So, starting off with pretty much a PR answer, and it's basically a PR question. Like, I don't know how else BVD is supposed to say about it. You know, it's one of those kind of toss-me-up questions. So, a PR response for a PR question. The next one is, what kind of changes have you made in your playstyle and play population since the service started? And the answer is, number of Japanese players for War Thunder continues to increase, but with the official launch of the service via DMM Games in 2016, the rate of increase has more than tripled. Currently, hundreds of thousands of players registered in War Thunder are using Japanese. So that either refers to the language or the client itself. That is insane, and it shows you why some of these partnerships are incredibly integral to a product. The fact that they are on DMM Games has obviously given them a boost, but also at the same time, one thing that has to be mentioned is also War Thunder in other areas has been increasing a lot since 2016 as well. The difference between 2016 War Thunder and 2021 War Thunder is massive in terms of content and in terms of stuff which has been added. Just to give you a general example, obviously stuff like from a Japanese point of view, Japanese helicopters were added basically after 2016, Japanese naval as well. Aviation, I believe, was around at the time. And then when it comes to ground forces would have probably been added at a similar time to that, when it was actually added into the game. It might be, let's see, I could just check it right now. So it was in 2016 December that the Japanese were added, so the partnership probably happened just slightly before this. So you have 3 major tech trees that are added to the game for Japan itself. So of course there's going to be an increase of Japanese player base, but at a rate of, times 3, that is very impressive. What are your impressions of the Japanese market and players? The answer is the Japanese market is very different to enter without a local partner. Localizing the game is not enough in order to convey the correct message. All communications, whether text-based or visual-based, need to be tailored and produced locally. Japanese players are generous with their passion for their favorite games, so it's worth the effort. In terms of sales, Japan is one of the top 5 countries. So a few tidbits of information there, once again emphasizing the partnership between Gaijin and DMM Games, talking about how useful it is and how it's beneficial to both sides, and also how important marketing is to different areas of the world. When something is advertised to a Japanese set of players compared to, let's say, an American or German or Russian set of players, the marketing will be completely different. And this is actually something we saw when it came to a presentation that was given a few years ago by a World of Tanks employee who worked in the North American region. He was basically talking about the data that they collect on players, which is then used to be able to market to specific types of players and to try and get, the most out of them. That'll be exactly the same thing that War Thunder does, because it's what everybody does when it comes to this industry and marketing in general. And to see that Japan is in one of the top 5 countries for revenue generated or sales in general, not too much of a surprise when you think about it. Japan has a population of 125 million people. That's quite a lot. It's a decent amount. Larger than places like, the vast majority of places or countries in Europe. So the player base area is quite larger. They generally have a decent set of expendable income when at least it comes to their general population. If I was going to hazard a guess when it comes to the other top 5 countries, America is obviously going to be in there. Germany is probably up there too. Russia may be up there. But at least from the sales statistics I've seen in general, normally the 2 areas which are very good when it comes to revenue generated, you're looking at North American region and then Western Europe. So my guess is, those areas will be the ones which conquer. But to see Japan in the top 5, it just shows how important stuff like these partnerships are and how they are integral to War Thunder in general. And then the next one I'm going to paraphrase, just because it's written a bit awkwardly. Basically, was the pandemic affected by the game usage status and development schedule? So did the pandemic affect, the production cycle of War Thunder? And the answer is the whole team has switched to teleworking, but the development plan hasn't changed at all. As always, we continue to release major updates 5 times a year. In the midst of an epidemic, the largest ever major update, New Power, released in November 2020, which has become War Thunder 2.0. Currently, most developers work from home, basically wherever they like with an internet connection. Some people move to overseas, rural areas, beaches, etc. to work efficiently. Others find it more convenient to go to the office. Game usage surged in April 2020, and the number of simultaneous users increased by 30% in just 1 month. It has been gradually increasing since then due to the influence of COVID-19. There is a feeling of blockage all over the world, but I think it was possible to excite the mood with a game like War Thunder. And this is something we've seen from not just gaming, but also social media and internet usage in general. Because of the pandemic, what you end up having is people with a ton more free time and also a ton more time at home. So they have to find ways of being able to, excite themselves or be able to find new hobbies. And gaming is something that a lot of people turn to alongside stuff such as social media to throw out a bunch of their ideas. A lot of people even turn to food and other things, like cooking at home and everything like that, which has been fantastic to see. But in April 2020, it is insane to think that the player base, or simultaneous users, I should say, increased by 30% in just 1 month. That is insanity when you think about the size of War Thunder, and also is definitely a contributing factor to why the servers in general have not been great over the last year, because it didn't just increase in that month, it has been gradually increasing since then, meaning that there is more load and more stuff going on. That is an insane amount of people. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of people just there. And also, we have the fact that in the last year as well, War Thunder was in either the top 20 or top 30 revenue-generating games on Steam, which is not even their major platform. It just shows how well War Thunder is doing right now, and why all of the people who used to talk about the game being dead over the last 5 years have disappeared, because they were wrong then, and they're going to be wrong in the future as well, until the servers eventually shut, probably in an incredibly long time. They also talk about the idea of new power being War Thunder 2.0, which I think is a really cool, block on it. They obviously called it, the 2.1 patch in game itself, so a big landmark for the game itself. It increased the game, quality a lot, and also did bring along a lot of bugs, but luckily a lot of them were fixed by then. They also talk about the fact that, a ton of people were working from home, and this is something that I found as well. In my work, generally, a lot of people have started working from home as well. I personally prefer going into an office environment. I feel like getting work done at home, I'm a lot less productive. I don't get a ton of other stuff done because I like to, split work life and home life. But I can understand how it would fit a lot more people in a much more relaxed environment. It means if you have like a deadline for a day, you can maybe, do it for 2 hours, take an hour break, do it for another 2 hours instead of slogging on a machine for that length of time and then go home and hope that you got everything done. The other thing to mention though, and this is something which I feel like is going to be a bad side effect of this stuff. So I've heard a lot of people talking about how working from home is great. Yes, it might be for a ton of people, but the idea of keeping stuff under wraps. So what I mean by this is new projects or stuff that you're NDA'd for, or generally things which are supposed to be kept secret until launch. So basically marketing stuff. That is going to kind of fly out the window. And we've already seen that when it comes to War Thunder. What we end up seeing a lot of the time is the fact that pretty much every update of the last year has been leaked before it has come out. And what I mean by this is the list of vehicles that has been available for that update. This time we haven't had such a list, at least yet, and it kind of shows, how at least maybe it might be a little bit better now, but still, it's something that's going to continue, and this is what happens when you have more people involved in the working process. You don't just have the worker now you have the worker's family, and what happens, or maybe you have the people who the worker lives with. Maybe they live in an apartment complex with a few other people. Well, what stops those people talking to other people about what's being worked on? Maybe they take some pictures, all of that good stuff. They think it's harmless, and then bang, now you have a bunch of stuff which isn't supposed to be out there. So it's something to think about, but still, it shows how much War Thunder is growing, and at least the team behind it seems to be doing well as well. The next one is 5 years of service. You also obtain materials such as Japanese weapons and produce them. Have you had any difficulties? And with the answer, overseas researchers' information on mass-produced famous weapons is available to some extent, but this game reproduces dozens of lesser-known weapons. It's difficult to obtain materials for such weapons, and they're all written in Japanese. In particular, the Type 5 Chi-Ri second plan, or the Chi-Ri 2, which is a prototype vehicle developed at the end of World War II, and the special vehicles under trial production, later Type 61 tanks, so basically the prototypes of them, the STA 1, 2, and 3, the post-war vehicles, such as, and the modern vehicles, such as the Type 90 tank, struggled. So, pretty much what BBBD is saying there is getting information on specific vehicles is very hard to do. And this is not too much of a surprise. If you see all of the vehicles that he's actually labeled there, they're all ones which have had significant changes with them over time in War Thunder. The Chi-Ri 2, when it comes to how its main gun works with its autoloader, that was changed quite a long time ago. The STA 1 and 2, those vehicles, their turrets were way too small compared to what they should have been, and eventually they got an updated model. And the Type 90, at least with its rear reload, and some of its base ideas, such as its armor and also its mobility, have been changed over the years. So it's kind of showing how it's important to have, good overseas researchers. Also, at the same time, you've got to be very careful with overseas researchers because you don't know what agenda they're trying to push, or maybe there is multiple ideas which can be put forward, and they only put forward one of them. So you've got to be super careful of stuff like that. So yeah, it's a very odd situation, but hopefully, at least right now, they seem to be in a good place when it comes to the information that they have gathered. And hopefully, with other countries, such as China, for example, this will be able to be done as well. DMM Games is conducting interviews with the Self-Defense Forces and its own campaign. How do you feel about such efforts? The support for DMM Games is invaluable. Although it's possible to visit museums during World War II on their own, it is unlikely that the Self-Defense Force will allow foreign companies to enter the test sites. The military ministries and agencies in every country are quite strict, and it is not easy to talk about. With the help of DMM Games, it's possible to obtain high-quality photos and video footage of SDF equipment, and how vehicles such as the Type 74 tank behave in-game compared to real vehicles. I got feedback from the Self-Defense Force members. With this cooperation, we're able to achieve the same look, sound, and behavior as a real main battle tank or jet fighter. And this is really cool, and it's also something that shows, the DMM partnership is not just about being on the platform. It is the fact that they are willing to go out there and collect information and also interview individuals and get videos and audio recordings of, vehicles to aid the game itself. Shows that there's a lot of passion which is put into this stuff, which is really nice to see. When it comes to these vehicles from Japan, it's also the reason why they have really unique sounds in the game, because of course they sound, a lot louder and generally a lot better than a ton of other vehicles, because a lot of vehicles have their sounds reproduced instead of actual recordings of them, whereas stuff such as the Type 74 and the Type 90 and so on, they have actually gone out and recorded the audio of those vehicles, which means that they can actually put them straight up in the game, and obviously with a few tweaks here and there. But it's really cool, and I hope in the future there is more realistic sounds which are added as well. Jet fighters are the third generation from the 60s to the 80s, and tanks are the latest third generation. What kind of weapons will be introduced in the future? The answer is, basically, we plan to gradually shift to new weapons, so it's easy to imagine the next weapon to appear. Players may ask about the F-14 Tomcat. Of course, we are working on it, but I think there are still gaps to fill before we go beyond the third generation. So, obviously, when it comes to stuff like the Tomcat, we all know it's coming. It is an iconic vehicle, it makes sense to come, but at the same time, there is no point in leaping towards a vehicle when there are some stuff come before it. One of the things that we've seen recently when it comes to stuff such as F-104s, they were added and they were never really vehicles which took over the game. Some of them are incredibly good, others are very much standard, like the F-104A for example. And there is this constant need from a lot of players to keep having the next stage or the next step in development when it comes to especially aviation. So when something like the MiG-27 comes out and it's not as good, or the MiG-23 even, and it's not as good as previous stuff, or maybe other things fit the meta better, like the F5 or the MiG-21 bis, then what ends up happening is people kind of get annoyed with it. So it's much better to have this natural progression, where you get a little bit of power every update. And people talk about power creep a lot. War Thunder is basically based on power creep. That's why you have the BR system to try and deal with that stuff. So we are going to constantly keep getting more modern stuff, or more better stuff. Just like how in Naval today, it was released that a new battleship for Britain was coming, which is going to be slightly better than the ones that we already have. And then at the same time, I really don't like when generations are talked about, because everybody has different definitions when it comes to generations, and also at the same time we have 1990s vehicles or aircraft, in the game. The J7, for example, the J7E that we have is a mid-1990s to early 2000s plane, which is why using years or historical accuracy when it comes to eras as an idea is never going to work when it comes to War Thunder. Japan, in addition to the famous vehicles such as the Type 90 and the F-4EJ, minor weapons such as the Type 60 SPRG have appeared. But what will come next? So this is specifically for Japan. And the answer is, last year we added a battleship to War Thunder, but we started with a model from the early 20th century. The Fuso, commissioned in 1915, is currently underway, but there are also many Japanese cruisers and battleships famous for World War II that will be added later. We're also researching the next generation of Type 10 tanks, but we don't know when we can add them because we don't have enough credible non-confidential information about them, basically. So, obviously Japan was a major naval player from the 1900s to the 1950s, and what's going to happen is they're going to constantly get improvements, especially to their blue water fleet tech trees. The Fuso was confirmed yesterday in a YouTube video from DMM Games, and it's nice to see that it is once again confirmed in this Q&A. And for the Japanese cruisers and battleships idea, DMM Games released not really a devblog, but more of like a news post today about the Yamato. So that should give you some ideas on what these guys are working on. And for the Type 10, we know that the actual model exists. We already saw it a few days ago, or even a few months ago when it came to the dev server leak, and it looks like they're still waiting on some information about the vehicle. I mean, for me personally, the top tier MBTs are all guesstimates anyway when it comes to a lot of their values, so I would be completely fine if it was just put in with those values, just guesstimated for balance purposes. I don't know what they're waiting on, but obviously, they need some kind of basis to put in the vehicle. The model's ready, now the stats just have to be ready too. In addition to War Thunder, Crossout, Crusade, and Enlisted are also available in Japan. What are your thoughts, or what are your plans for the future? And then, obviously, we have Anton Udinsev answering, and it says, we already offer all major online games in Japan. In addition, some announced and unpublished titles are in development and will be available in Japan as soon as they're ready. Please look forward to it. So PR answer, basically, but it does say that there are stuff in the pipeline. We know that there is some kind of flight simulator game which is being worked on with Darkflow software, so maybe that will be kind of cool to see. And also, we're just going to have to see what is available when it comes to everything else. The Gaijin product so far, it's very much hit and miss from my personal opinion. There are some ideas which are amazing, like Crossout, but I find the gameplay quite boring. War Thunder, obviously, I really enjoy. Enlisted, I've enjoyed a lot. Crusade, I'm not too much into the Battle Royale stuff, and then stuff like Star Conflict, it's never really been my genre. But the fact is, they also have that water game which is coming out. Maybe they're talking about that one as well. That one kind of looks a little bit interesting. But at least for me personally, I'm not too interested in the other products. But, Flight Simulator, if that ever comes out, that could be pretty fun. Then we have April Fool's Day of Enlisted has become one game as Crusade, and weapon data of War Thunder has been incorporated into Enlisted, with development to be carried out in collaboration with the title. And Anton says, most of the games use their own Daegor engine, so earlier graphics improvements in one game will soon be reflected in other titles. In addition, the cooperation system of the development team is also substantial, With a focus on creativity and productivity, we were able to develop prototypes for fun events and games, which also helped create April Fool's events, some of them which became completely independent games such as Crusade. There are also things. In fact, we want to experiment with our technology and involve more talented developers besides Gaijin to create even more interesting games and game modes. So basically they're looking to expand, which they have been doing for a long time. They have their gamer outreach program kind of thing, which they do at Gaijin. It's on their website. It's basically where they are a publishing house as well, so developers can pitch them ideas, and then they can, maybe get some money, and then it's published by Gaijin, and then it's gone from there. Maybe that's what he's talking about. But also at the same time, when it comes to the Dagor engine, all of these games run off the Dagor engine, so you can. It's much easier to work together on projects to improve them and push forward with them, and also be able to, try and improve them. Together. If one team has an interesting idea of how to implement something, then the other team, could maybe benefit off that. I remember reading somewhere that, for example, in War Thunder, with the creators that are coming to the game, obviously in Enlisted, you've been able to dig holes for a while now, but the crater ideas and the actual deformation ideas have been being worked on by War Thunder for a lot longer than the Enlisted stuff. It's just how the creative process sometimes goes. And it's also nice to have another confirmation about how Crusade Fawad was born out of an April Fool's event. For some reason, there's a narrative that has been going around that Enlisted was born out of Crusade Fawad, because there's a lot of people who can't do research and just look at dates of things and go, well, Enlisted came out after Crusade Fawad, so that must mean that Crusade Fawad is the foundation, when actually it's the other way around. And then we have, regarding the next updates, please tell us the content you want to pay attention to and the part that you are focusing on. And the answer is next updates will continue to provide players with dozens of new Air Force, Army, and Navy military weapons. We also introduced the guided bombs in the latest updates, but not all countries have them, so we will increase the number of jets that can use guided bombs. We're also working on the development of a completely new game mechanism. I can't tell you yet, but one of them will significantly change the experience of air and ground combat players. So I don't know when this interview was actually done. It was published yesterday on the 13th. I'm pretty sure the mechanism or mechanic they're talking about is the craters and also the sand, or pushing up dirt, basically. So terrain deformation. I'm pretty sure that's what's being talked about. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong about that. But that to me looks like what it is. And at the same time, the guided bomb stuff, there's only one nation in the game which has them right now, and there's a bunch of other nations that could easily have them. We're going to have to see if they add in new jets for those guided bombs, because there are some which could easily be added, which would be nice to see, or if they're just going to be added to pre-existing vehicles. Maybe you can work out which ones they would be. And then the last question, which isn't really a question, it's please give a message to Japanese fans. And the answer is, thank you for playing War Thunder. Now that many doors are closed, we consider it an important and wonderful way to enjoy the game with people all over the world. We would like you to try all the hundreds and thousands of military weapons that we plan to add in the future, and we hope that you will continue to work with us for many years to come. So, a little bit of a PR message at the end, but always nice to hear. I really like the stuff that DMM does. It gives us, at least in the other areas of the world, a good insight in what is happening with the Japanese side of things. It would be really cool if there was a bunch of other publicly available information for other areas of the game, but unfortunately there isn't. And as always, it's lovely to go through these types of interviews. If you want to have a look at it for yourself in the original, Japanese, there will be a link in it in the description for you. If you are interested in looking at the DMM article I referenced earlier with the Yamato, I'll leave a link to that too. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Professor X 1718, Orangetail, Sakoshi Tiger, BRFC 15, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe A, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, and then Kyle Kin, Barine, Lafouche, and also Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.